Welcome everyone to this explainer. Okay, I want you to imagine just for a second, a company that builds your smartphone in Asia, right? Then they sell it to you at a massive flagship store in Europe. And to top it off, all your cloud data is sitting on servers deep in South America. Now, imagine you need to sue them, or let's say a government wants to tax them. Where exactly do you go? Well, today, we're unraveling this massive geographical puzzle that's literally at the heart of modern business. We are looking at these sprawling, borderless global enterprises and asking one very specific, absolutely crucial question. How on earth are these giants legally and functionally anchored to a single spot on a map?
I'm your host, Chowdhury Zishan, and I am so incredibly pumped to guide you through this today. Real quick, before we dive into the mystery, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you never miss out on our future explainers. All right, so we're looking at a huge paradox of the modern world. You've got these massive global corporations that seem to exist everywhere all at once. Their products are sitting in your living room, their teams span dozens of time zones, and their supply chains wrap around the entire globe. But legally speaking, they have to be anchored to one specific spot. No way around it. So today, we're going to demystify exactly how we find that center point, what the law elegantly calls the principal place of business. Here's a quick look at our roadmap for today's explainer. We'll kick things off with where do corporations live? Then we'll break down the anatomy of the PPOB. After that, we'll dive into the nerve center test, compare footprint versus command, and finally wrap up with the jurisdictional shadow. Let's just get right into it.
All right, Section 1. Where do corporations live? This is the ultimate geographical puzzle of global business. Moving right along to Section 2. Anatomy of the PPOB. Let's dissect the corporation and actually define this legal anchor. Okay, let's really dive into this one. To solve the puzzle of where a completely scattered business actually lives, we've got to start with the baseline legal definition. The principal place of business, or the PPOB as we'll call it, is officially defined as the main location where a company's executive management and core operations are directed and controlled. Now, take a close look at what's specifically missing from that definition. It doesn't say a single word about where the most employees are sitting. It doesn't mention where the majority of products are manufactured or sold. The law actually had to evolve past just looking at physical size because, honestly, counting factories or retail workers in our digital age just leads to a total jurisdictional nightmare. So instead, this definition zeroes in entirely on the origin of direction and control. The legal anchor is exactly where the brain of the company resides, not necessarily its largest muscle.
In practice, finding this PPOB is kind of like finding the absolute dead center of a giant, complex Venn diagram. It almost always sits right at the exact overlap of three distinct things. First up, you've got the headquarters. That's the primary physical spot where the C-suite actually goes to work. Second, the decision office. This is the main hub where all those high-stakes, long-term business decisions are being hammered out. And third, the legal address. You know, the official regulatory paperwork address that gets used for tax filings and corporate charters. When you find that precise location where all three of those circles overlap, the physical executives, the strategic brain trust, and the regulatory paperwork, boom, you have successfully found your PPOB. It is the true geographical heartbeat of the entire entity.
Which brings us perfectly to Section 3, the nerve center test, finding the origin of strategic command.
So, we know what a PPOB is in theory, but how do courts actually figure this out in the real world when a company's structure is just incredibly messy, with subsidiaries and remote workers literally everywhere? Well, in the United States, the Supreme Court established this beautifully simple framework known as the nerve center test. Think of it as an insider's secret to cutting through all the corporate noise. Instead of getting bogged down by thousands of local storefronts, scattered warehouses, or some convoluted web of holding companies, courts use the nerve center test to track the pure, unfiltered origin of strategic command. They are literally trying to find the exact room, the specific boardroom table, where the highest level officers are sitting and projecting their power outward to the rest of that vast corporate body. And the absolute most crucial point here is what those high-level officers are actually doing while they're sitting in that room. The nerve center test specifically looks for three highly active verbs: direct, control, and coordinate. To really wrap your head around this, think about what these look like in action. Direct means setting the long-term vision. It's the executive saying, hey, we're pivoting our entire product line to artificial intelligence next year. Control means holding the purse strings, right? Having the ultimate veto power over major corporate assets. And coordinate isn't just, sending a couple of emails. It's the high-level daily orchestration of a sprawling global supply chain from one single centralized hub. The courts want to pinpoint exactly where that active, strategic command is happening.
All right, moving to section 4, footprint versus command. We're going to see why physical presence absolutely does not equal strategic control.
To really see this in action and to understand why a massive physical footprint doesn't dictate strategic control, let's contrast two drastically different real-world examples. It is so fascinating to see how the law treats these massive yet totally different corporate structures.
Let's take a massive global tech enterprise, someone like Apple. Their physical footprint is, frankly, beyond immense. Millions of devices floating around, massive retail stores in dozens of countries, data centers spread across continents, and manufacturing partners practically everywhere. If you were measuring just by sheer physical footprint, they'd basically be a resident of the entire world. But because the executive leadership, the specific folks making those massive direct control and coordinate decisions, because they operate primarily out of Cupertino, California, that specific city is their legal home. That is their PPOB. Now flip that around. Imagine an international restaurant chain. Say they've got 200 distinct stores operating across a dozen different countries, thousands of servers, cooks, and local managers everywhere. You might think, okay, their location is completely decentralized. But if all the major strategic decisions, the sweeping menu changes, the aggressive global expansion plans, the deep financial structuring, if all of that originates from one single executive office in Rome, then Rome is its principal place of business. It's wild, right? Despite having a completely scattered physical footprint in both scenarios, it's the singular nerve center that dictates the ultimate legal location.
And that brings us to our final section, Section 5, the jurisdictional shadow. Let's explore the massive implications of pinning down this singular PPOB.
So, why does finding this one single specific point on a map matter so much? Why do governments care? Why do other businesses care? And why should you care? Because the principal place of business casts a massive, totally unavoidable jurisdictional shadow. It acts as the fundamental anchor for 4 major pillars of the corporation. First up, the legal pillar. If you're signing a multi-million-dollar contract, or if you need to file a massive lawsuit against a company, the PPOB dictates exactly which judge, in which legal system, gets to decide your fate. Second, the tax pillar. This dictates the overarching rules for tax filings and corporate registration, which, let's be real, can literally mean the difference of billions of dollars. Third, the financial pillar. It serves as the crucial anchor for banking relationships, credit facilities, and major financial compliance. And finally, the fourth pillar, compliance itself. It establishes the overarching corporate residence in specific legal frameworks. Absolutely everything is tied back to this one single anchor.
When you pull all of this together, the corporate residence framework is fundamentally just a massive legal filter. It takes a scattered, globally chaotic physical body, all those thousands of employees, the warehouses, the server farms, and distills it all down to one singular anchor. Courts use the nerve center test to slice right through the physical complexity. They ignore all the noise, and they zero in on exactly where the executives direct, coordinate, and control. From that one central point, the entire company's ultimate legal, tax, financial, and compliance realities just flow outward. It really is a game changer, an incredible mechanism for bringing strict legal order to a seemingly borderless enterprise.
So the ultimate takeaway from today's explainer is this. A corporation might operate absolutely everywhere, but its legal identity lives exclusively where it thinks. The physical footprint? That's just the body. The nerve center is the brain. So I'm going to leave you with this final provocative thought to consider about your own organizational structures, or maybe the partners you do business with. Where does your company think? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, keep analyzing, and I'll see you next time.